This will sound very strange, but Alec Baldwin's shot on the movie set in New Mexico that killed the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, and the car accident that killed 9 people from the University of the Southwest in New Mexico were major prophetic signs that is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash that will be caused due to a bird strike on precisely June 7th, 2022. After Harris's death, she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and Michelle Obama will be replaced by Barack Obama in October 2022. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. It has been known since the autumn of 2020, before the election, that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash, but it has been known since January that she will die in a plane crash on precisely June 7th, 2022. In Revelation chapter 2, Jesus said that he hates the Nicolaitan doctrine and that he is coming, future tense, to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this Nicolaitan doctrine. This letter was written to a church in Asia Minor in the 1st century. However, it is clear that the letters that Jesus wrote to the 7 churches are also speaking to the end times period. If Jesus is coming to make war on those with this Nicolaitan doctrine in the end times period, it stands to reason that there is a Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. The purpose of this video is to prove that there is a specific Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that God has clearly identified through his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that is only being explained on this channel. And the purpose of this video is to prove that, first, this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and to prove specifically what God has undeniably communicated and identified as being the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. The reason God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove what the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is. To not appreciate that this is the purpose of this prediction is to miss the point of this video, and it is to miss the point of this video channel. What I am about to explain in this video is just a small drop in the bucket of the evidence and signs that God has used to communicate what the Nicolaitan doctrine is. This video is being made on June 6th. It is last minute, but I wanted to put this together and use this to prove what I am saying, and also to point you to other videos that will explain more this Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. But let's start right here and get into the signs. On October 22nd, 2021, Alec Baldwin was in the news for having shot on the movie set the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. This was in New Mexico. There is so much to say regarding this prophetic sign, but this isn't the purpose of this video, to explain it in detail and give you the full deal on this amazing sign, which I have done a great job in the must-watch Great American Eclipse Prophecy video. So I will refer you to that video to learn more about all of this. The reason also for saying that is because God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes it true and not a product of one's imagination, and what makes it different and unique from everything else on the internet. But in order to explain something with a second and third and multiple witnesses that confirm something, those things themselves also need second and third and multiple witnesses to confirm them. And so it becomes an interconnected web. It also becomes infinite, which is just like the Bible. The Bible isn't a linear document. It is interconnected and everything connects to each other, and it is infinite. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible. The same with God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. That said, this prophetic sign is communicating much more than what the Nicolaitan doctrine is. Alec Baldwin's shot is also, for example, communicating what the mark of the Antichrist is. But that's another story. In the book of Revelation, the number 144 is a very prominent and prophetic number. And it refers the 144,000 souls that is being described in Revelation chapter 7 and 14 are in fact those that are raptured. I know that's controversial, and I haven't actually heard one evangelical come to that conclusion, to be honest. Maybe there are others out there that realize this as well. But this is explained how this is the case in the must-watch American Pharaoh Prophecy video. It's actually explained in part 2. The American Pharaoh Prophecy video is one of the most important videos on this channel, and arguably is the most important video regarding the signs pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. And so I won't explain it again, but the 144,000 is symbolism for those that are raptured, which is also described in chapter 7, the great multitude. It's symbolism for the great multitude, and the 144,000 is symbolism for those that are raptured. And in chapter 7, it describes 4 angels that are holding back the 4 winds of destruction, so that the 144,000, symbolic 144,000, can be sealed. And these are the ones that will be raptured and then return with Jesus. And that's why they are described with Jesus in chapter 14, for example. And so the reason why this is relevant, as we can see in this diagram, there are 3 connections involving the number 144. But God is using signs in the 4 corners states, which is Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. They come together in a location in the U.S. called the 4 Corners. And this is symbolism for the 4 angels that are holding back the 4 winds so that the 144,000 can be sealed. And that's why, as we see in this diagram here, we have prophetic signs in New Mexico, Utah, and New Mexico, Colorado, all being connected together with the number 144, as I will explain. Again, this Alec Baldwin shot is also symbolism for what the mark of the Antichrist is, and this prophetic sign took place in the 47th state to join the Union, and that is because the 47th president will be the first female president, Michelle Obama, which will lead to the Antichrist, Barack Obama, becoming the 48th president. The 48th state, by the way, is Arizona, one of the 4 corners states. The first female president, the 47th president, is why we have this woman, this female, Helena Hutchins, that was shot. Now, this occurred exactly 144 weeks after the third of 3 prophetic earthquakes that were 4.0 or greater that occurred in Hutchinson, Kansas. And that's why it connects with 144 weeks exactly to the death of Hutchins. This prophetic earthquake in Hutchinson, Kansas, was the day that the Kansas City Chiefs won the AFC Championship and made their way to their first Super Bowl in literally 50 years, which is extremely prophetic. 50 years connections. God uses many 50 years connections. They are extremely prophetic because 50 years is extremely prophetic in Leviticus chapter 25. God uses the Kansas City Chiefs to symbolize the church. The Chiefs symbolize fire and Pentecost. And Pentecost symbolizes the church, and fire symbolizes Pentecost. For example, the colors of the Chiefs' uniform are colors that symbolize fire, yellow and red. Before the Super Bowl, the first female fire chief of Kansas City had a friendly bet with the first ever open lesbian fire chief of San Francisco. The team from San Francisco is the 49ers, and in the Omer count to Pentecost, we have a 49-day and a 50-day count. And the number 50 symbolizes the church because Pentecost literally means 50th day, and Pentecost symbolizes the church. And that's why the Chiefs going to their first Super Bowl in 50 years is also symbolism for the church. Also, prior to the Super Bowl, the famous quarterback for the Chiefs sold his firefighter helmet on eBay for charity. Also, after the game, it was national news how a Kansas City Chiefs fan had accidentally caught himself on fire. It was also said that the two female singers during the halftime show were on fire. And the big story of the game was how the Kansas City Chiefs caught fire at the end of the game. Pentecost symbolizes fire, as on the first Pentecost, it was fire that came down on Mount Sinai on the 50th day out of Egypt. And the first Pentecost of the church age, tongues of fire came down on the disciples in the upper room, which was symbolism for the first Pentecost when fire came down on the heights of Mount Sinai. The two other prophetic earthquakes, which occurred in August of 2019, just a few months before this prophetic earthquake, they pointed to the prophetic signs in Philadelphia, which I have explained in great detail in other videos, but included the church roof fire, which is contrasting the Church of Laodicea with the Church of Philadelphia. The Church of Laodicea, Jesus said, was lukewarm and wanted to vomit out of his mouth, and said that they were thinking that they were in need of nothing, but didn't realize that they were blind, pitiable, and naked. What I am about to explain is that the reason why this Church of Laodicea thinks that it is in need of nothing is because of its doctrine, which Jesus has pointed to through these earthquakes in Hutchinson that connect with 144 weeks exactly, which hints at those that will be raptured, which is the Church of Philadelphia, the only church that Jesus said in his 7 letters would be spared the tribulation. In other words, the only ones that will be raptured before this death of Hutchins. The reason for the death of Hutchins that connects with the Hutchinson earthquakes is because God is pointing to Anne Hutchinson, the leader of what is known as the antinomian controversy at the providential spiritual founding of America at the Massachusetts Bay Colony in Boston. Her and her followers were banished for this antinomian theology that they were trying to impose on the other pilgrims. Today, there is such a theology that is just as divisive for these people that are promoting it. And those that are promoting it, just like Anne Hutchinson and her followers, claim that those that don't hold this doctrine are heretics and are not saved. Yet it is them that are the heretics. And Jesus said he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on this Nicolaitan doctrine. This Nicolaitan doctrine that produces the lukewarm church. And by the way, when Jesus said that the Church of Laodicea was lukewarm, he didn't just mean not cold and not hot or sitting on the fence, etc. What he actually meant was that they are stagnant and spiritually dead. The reason why we can know this is because Laodicea in its time was famous for piping in hot and cold water into the city. Cold water and hot water each served their purposes. Cold water was life-giving and hot water also had its purposes, but lukewarm water was stagnant and didn't have a purpose. It was spiritually dead. It symbolized spiritual stagnation and death. And God is communicating through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which the main theme of which is judgment warning for the church. specifically the American church, and specifically, even more so, the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea. Because, as Peter said, judgment begins with the church. Today, the church has lost its saltiness, and if it shines its light at all, it shines it within its four walls. It is not active, and the reason is because they'll say things like, well, I just love Jesus, and I just want to tell people about Jesus. For example, if they do tell others about Jesus, but they aren't involved in the culture. They aren't involved in the culture war. They aren't involved in the spiritual war that we are battling today. And this is also why they don't have any knowledge. And as the prophet Hosea said, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, and because my people reject knowledge, I reject them from being my priests. And when they have lost their saltiness, as Jesus said, they are no longer good for anything except to be trampled under the feet of men. And this is the reason why the end times judgment is beginning now. It is because judgment begins with the church. And Jesus is very, very displeased with the church, for its Nicolaitan doctrine, which is the Anne Hutchinson doctrine, which is antinomianism. Antinomianism is Latin for anti-law. And it is also known, the antinomian controversy of Anne Hutchinson is also known as the free grace controversy. Today, free grace doctrine is pervasive throughout the evangelical church. It is also known as easy believism or no lordship salvation, and it is also related to what is called sovereign grace and monergism. Sovereign grace and free grace come in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, and they both lead to the heretical doctrine of once saved, always saved, or eternal security. And this is what produces the complacency and the spiritually dead Church of Laodicea, that Jesus said he wants to vomit out of his mouth and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Now, there's much, much more to say. I haven't even really said anything. I will explain more, somewhat more, at the end of this video regarding doctrine. Hopefully by now I have gotten your attention, though. And that, again, is the purpose of this prediction, is to prove what I am saying and to get your attention so that you now finally take a second look at what you have thought to be true all of this time. Because as I will demonstrate at the end of this video, what you've thought all of this time, the church fathers, the ante-Nicene fathers, those that came before Augustine, who corrupted the Western church in the 4th century, and whose doctrine is passed down to the modern church through Calvin and Luther, the church fathers didn't agree with your doctrine. In fact, if you were to learn what they actually believed, you would be shocked, because what they believed is what you consider to be today heresy. And when I say you, I mean, the vast majority of evangelicals, not all, of course. Also, besides pointing you to the end of this video, I'm also pointing you to the video titled The Big Picture of Signs video. Watch that video as well. It is arguably the central video of this channel. Let's move on to the other prophetic signs that are also demonstrating how this prediction is known ahead of time. How Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike tomorrow on June 7th. All right, so now let's see. Well, we've got the 4 corner signs, and by the way, that's the 4.0 earthquake here. The 3 of them that were 4.0 or greater. This connects with 144 days. So we have 144 weeks connecting in turn with 144 days to this other sign involving New Mexico. This was the day of the car crash that killed 9 people from the University of the Southwest in New Mexico. All right, I'm just going to read an email I sent others regarding this prophetic sign. The 144 days between the 144 horses sign and Kamala Harris's plane crash, and the other major signs on January 14th to Harris's crash on June 7th, can be broken into 60 days, and Obama, the Antichrist, is currently 60 years old, and 84 days. Now, 60 days is also 1,440 hours, and there are 1,440 minutes in a day. This timekeeping we inherit from ancient Babylon, and in the Bible, Babylon is Antichrist symbolism. 84 days, well, Obama was born on the date 8/4, and this is why God uses the number 84 to point to the Antichrist, Barack Obama. But also in Bible prophecy, the Antichrist is said to rule for a symbolic 7 years period of the end times, which is 84 months. Also, the date 8/4, August 4th, is the 216th day of the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. There's more to 84, which is explained in other videos, including the record-tying number of days in space that the Dragon crew did. That was 84 days before the Dragon crew splashed down at the beginning of the final 1,260 days of the end times period before the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement in 2024. But there's much more to that. So 9 people were killed in the crash, and the crash was caused by a 13-year-old who was illegally driving a pickup truck. This was the major part of the story. The news story was how it was this 13-year-old that killed the 9 people. This is confirmation that is a prophetic sign, because God pairs the numbers 9 and 13 together as Antichrist symbolism, because the number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes judgment. And the number 13 from the Bible symbolizes the Antichrist. As Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham, Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the months. And the 2 Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. And so 9 times 13 is symbolism for judgment from the Antichrist on the nation, and 9 times 13 is 117, which is hinting at the 117th Congress, during which the Antichrist will rise to power. The 117th Congress began in January of 2021. 7 of the deaths were on a trip representing their university in a golf tournament. The University of the Southwest in New Mexico is a Christian Baptist university, and their sports name is Mustangs, which confirms the 1,440 hours connection to the 144 horses sign. Also, the number 1,440 is Antichrist symbolism, but it also hints at the number 144, which, as I explained, is symbolism for those that will be raptured. And so this is a judgment warning for the church to not be left behind, if you will. And also, it needs to be mentioned here that the 144 horses sign occurred in Colorado, and it was on the same day as a prophetic plane crash in Utah. And the 144 horses sign in Colorado and the prophetic plane crash in Utah connects with 144 days to Kamala Harris's plane crash. As you can see here in this diagram also, the sign in Colorado, the 144 horses, and the plane crash in Utah connect with these signs, the shot in New Mexico and the crash involving the students from the university in New Mexico. And these are all states in the 4 corners, which again is also pointing to the 144,000. The 4 angels that hold back the 4 winds is symbolized by the 4 corners in these states. Also, the New Mexico Christian Baptist Church is confirmation for what I am saying is the theme of this diagram here and this video, and the theme of God's big picture of signs, which is judgment warning for the church. This is also in context of the shot, which, as I am saying, is identifying what the mark of the Antichrist is. And the big reason why the vast majority of the church has been unable to recognize that this is the mark of the Antichrist is its doctrine. which Jesus is coming to make war on. It's judgment for this doctrine, which is dispensationalism, which says that there are these supposed tribulation saints, even though the 7 churches were written to the church long before the tribulation, and that there are, as distinguished from that, these supposed church age saints, and therefore it can't be the mark of the Antichrist because, well, they're still here. And as this dispensationalism heretical doctrine says, all Christians will be raptured. And so therefore their reasoning is, well, I'm still here, so therefore it can't be the mark of the Antichrist. But the reason why they believe that is because of their heretical Gnostic doctrine. And it is rooted in Gnosticism, because Augustine was a Manichaean sect, in the Gnostic sect of Manichaean, for 9 years as an official auditor before he came into the Catholic Church and corrupted it with his Gnostic-influenced doctrine. And John wrote in his letters, he called these people that were trying to infiltrate the church, the Gnostics, he called them antichrists, which is sobering to think that the majority of Christians today have doctrine that is descended from these antichrists. There's a couple more minor connections. Hutchins was 42 years old. 42 symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Also, it symbolizes manslaughter, which is the case with this accident. All of the mentions of 42 are in context of manslaughter in the Bible. That is, both accidents, her death was manslaughter, as well as the car crash. Also, her death was exactly 44 months after the death of Billy Graham, and Billy Graham symbolizes the American church. The reason for 44 is because God uses that to point to the Antichrist, the 44th president that will persecute the American church. It just so happens that this University of the Southwest is celebrating its 60th anniversary year, which confirms the 60 days connection between the Mustangs sign and the 144 horses sign. It also confirms the relevance of the school in the sign, which again can only be symbolism for judgment warning for the church. And because it's Hutchins and Hutchinson in this diagram, it is judgment warning for a doctrine, and that doctrine is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which I have explained. All right, to finish this diagram, it is 84 days from the car crash involving the students from the University of the Southwest in New Mexico to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And again, 84 days is used as symbolism for the Antichrist, and through her death will lead to the rise of the Antichrist through her replacement. And we have symmetry in this diagram, symmetrical with the 84 days in this part of the diagram. And so this is a very sweet and simple, amazing diagram that is confirming everything that I'm saying. This prediction will prove it as well. And it is proving that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And it is the main theme of which is judgment warning for the church, and specifically for its doctrine, as is the case being explained through God's signs in this diagram and video, involving Helena Hutchins and the prophetic earthquakes in Hutchinson, Kansas. Once this prediction has come to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel and read the homepage of the website TrumpPrediction.com or HarrisCrashPrediction.com. Time is running out, and if for some reason you don't have enough time to watch all of the videos on this channel, I will leave a list of the most important videos in the description box below this video or on the homepage of the website. In terms of God's prophetic signs and knowing what God is doing. After having watched this video, you are now one of the most informed people on the planet. The question is, what will you now do with this information? And how many people will you help get this video to? Keep on posting the link to this video everywhere in social media. And if you would like the PDF file for the flyer I hand out on busy street corners, place on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put in mailboxes, please contact me at darrenjacksinbox@gmail.com. In my opinion, every single believer, unless they have a health condition, should be doing something like this in the streets every day. Also, everyone should have some of these flyers in their pockets, handing them out as they go about their daily business, when they walk from their car into the bank or to the grocery store. As they walk up and down the aisles of the grocery store, hand them out to people. I personally don't know what someone is thinking if they are not doing this. And if someone thinks that they are too shy to do this, what I have to say is get over it. Courage isn't a lack of fear. It is action in spite of it. And God wants us to be courageous for him. Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, so that the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any of them, that person is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at the watchman's hand. Revelation 12:8. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, and in this case faithless implies a doing, action, the detestable, as for the murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. In other words, this is a warning to be courageous and not cowardly or lazy. I personally believe that the flyer that I hand out is absolutely what is needed right now. But if it isn't my flyer, everyone should be handing out something as they go about their daily business. I personally believe that everyone has 20 minutes to an hour a day at least to be handing out flyers in these last days. But if you for some reason don't think that you do, you can be handing them out as you go about your daily business. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. There is absolutely no New Age or collective consciousness type of explanation for how these predictions were known ahead of time. They were known ahead of time through Bible prophecy and watching for God's prophetic signs. Jesus was not just another supposed enlightened master like the supposedly enlightened Buddha. Jesus was God incarnate, and he is the only way to eternal life and to God the Father. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. The purpose of the predictions in this video, the reason for God giving me a voice through these predictions in this video that will come to pass, is to prove the following things. The God of the Bible and Israel is the true God. God has a son, and he died for everyone. Everyone can be saved if they repent of sin and put their trust in him. That what is being explained on this channel is God's true big picture of signs. That the other assertions in this video are true, including that the doctrine of imminence, that we cannot know the precise day of his return, is false. That the doctrine that we cannot know right now the identity of the Antichrist is false. The VACCINEs are a spiritual abomination. The VACCINE is the mark of the Antichrist. It is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. The VACCINE is part of a transformative process that is leading to demonic possession. As Bible prophecy says, those that take the mark of the Antichrist are going to hell. The reason God has given me a voice through this prediction is to absolutely prove that the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a result of this false doctrine, which is a false gospel and doctrine straight from the pits of hell, is sovereign grace, commonly known as irresistible grace, which comes in the package called Calvinism, and what is called free grace, commonly referred to as unconditional grace, sometimes referred to as easy believism or cheap grace. It comes in a package called dispensationalism. Sovereign grace and free grace both come to the heretical conclusion of once saved, always saved. No one is saved past tense. No one is saved until they get to heaven. and one must remain in the faith while they are here on earth, which includes taking action. Sovereign grace and free grace can be properly referred to as antinomianism, a word rooted in Latin meaning against law. This heretical theology produces other related heretical doctrine. That is also the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth, such as no lordship salvation, which is the opposite of what the followers of no lordship salvation disparagingly call lordship salvation, the doctrine of predestination of the elect, that people are predestined before birth to go to heaven or hell. This doctrine that is straight from the pits of hell, which has its origin through Calvin and Luther and Augustine in the Gnostics, which John in his letters called Antichrist. Watch the links to videos in the description box below that refute the passages that these people claim support this doctrine of predestination of the elect. Once saved, always saved, also known as eternal security. The myth of imputed righteousness. Our righteousness is as filthy rags, a verse that Martin Luther isolated to develop his unfortunate theology, and the doctrine that all Christians will be raptured. Through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God has indisputably pointed to and identified these Nicolaitan doctrines. He has pointed to sovereign grace and free grace specifically. And again, the purpose for this prediction and the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this. When this prediction comes to pass, it will prove everything that I have just said. The majority of Christianity follows these doctrines. It is also the reason why the majority of Christianity is not able to recognize the mark of the Antichrist, and why they are presently in the process of taking the mark of the Antichrist. It is judgment on the church. The lukewarm church of Laodicea that has lost its saltiness and is no longer good for anything except to be trampled under the feet of men. Had the mark been completely obvious to every Christian, it would have defeated this purpose of deceiving those that have lost their saltiness. The dispensational belief in a supposed distinction between supposed church-age saints and tribulation saints is a product of their false Nicolaitan doctrine of free grace or unconditional grace. This false belief in supposed church-age saints and tribulation saints is wicked deception, and it is one reason why the followers of this doctrine are deceived into believing that the VACCINE, as it is right now in its current form, is not the mark of the Antichrist, and is instead a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, they do not have the spiritual eyes to perceive the truth because it is judgment on them for this doctrine. The ongoing argument between, on the one side, sovereign grace Calvinists and free grace dispensationalists, and those that don't have a systematic theology, a systematic way of interpreting the Bible, non-Calvinists and non-dispensationalists, that believe we have a free will, not some sort of unnecessary paradox between predeterminism and a free will, but a genuine, sincere free will, is very real. Each side believes the other side is very gravely and dangerously wrong, and therefore one side is in fact very gravely and dangerously wrong. The prediction in this video proves that God has demonstrated with which side he is very angry and which is gravely and dangerously wrong. That said, however, there was no excuse for people that follow sovereign grace and free grace theology and have the works that are a result of this theology, because all one needed to do was not ignore the countless passages that contradict their theology and read the Bible as a whole instead of isolating passages in order to proof text their position. Doctrine is important. One of the problems within evangelical culture is anti-intellectualism, which says that one's ignorance is equal to another one's knowledge. Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest to me. Make sure you watch the videos that I will link to in the description box below regarding doctrine. Learn what the early church fathers believed and how it does not comport with what Christians believe today, and how they would see what Christians believe today as being heresy. Learn what the early church fathers believed before the Western church was corrupted by Augustine in the 5th century when he joined the Catholic Church after being an official auditor in the Gnostic Manichaean sect for 9 years. After this prediction has come to pass, and the warning I am making here, I don't know what in the world someone is thinking if they choose to not watch all of the videos in the description box regarding doctrine. Also visit the website predictionsproveit.com. The problem within the church is that Christians don't really fear God. The root of this problem of a lack of fear of God is bad theology and doctrine. There is one key verse in the Bible that is essential for understanding the Bible, which speaks to the primary importance of fear of God. Genesis 22:12. He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Prior to this, God did not know that Abraham feared him, and Abraham had not demonstrated his faith. This was after God had accounted Abraham righteous for believing. James 2:17. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. James said this in context of 2 examples that he provided, which was how Rahab and Abraham demonstrated their faith through their actions. And this type of demonstration of faith that God is looking for typically involves risk and sacrifice. It is going to cost something. As Jesus said, one needs to become like a kernel of wheat and die and go into the ground before it can produce fruit. This death of the self before being born again costs something, and ultimately one's demonstration of faith for truth and righteousness could theoretically, literally cost someone their life. God is looking for those that fear him. It is the rare individual that fears God more than man. It is the rare individual that is willing to demonstrate his faith and fear of God and stand up for truth and righteousness. The mark of the Antichrist is beautifully designed to elicit this demonstration of faith. For example, any Christian that took the VACCINE mark of the Antichrist, knowing that fetal stem cells were used in its development, does not fear God. Also, everyone should know by now that the masks are a lie. The size of the virus is 1 micron, and no mask filters below 3 microns. Even medical masks don't prevent the virus. These masks are like trying to keep mosquitoes out of one's backyard through using a chain link fence. This is why before it became political, every single Western country, as part of their protocol for a possible pandemic, included not recommending masks for the population, which is why even Fauci recommended not wearing masks at the beginning of COVID. For those with spiritual eyes to see, it is clear that wearing the masks is for the purpose of virtue signaling that you are a member of the COVID cult, and ultimately they demonstrate spiritual allegiance to Satan. The masks are for identifying the enemy and waging political and spiritual war on conservatives and Christians. If there is a supposed precursor to the VACCINE, it is definitely masks. No Christian should be wearing masks unless it is absolutely necessary, like boarding an airplane. And Christians should not be participating in religious worship inside a church with other people wearing masks. These people are deceived, period. It doesn't matter. They are deceived. They might be nice people. They might seem like Christians, but if they are wearing masks and social distancing inside a church, they don't get it, and they are part of the COVID cult, which is about spiritual allegiance to Satan. Most people believe that the Nicolaitan works Jesus referred to was gross, blatant sinning, and that the Nicolaitan doctrine is somehow the perverse doctrine in, quote, those other churches, unquote, but certainly not in their church. This is absolutely not true. God's big picture of signs has undeniably communicated that the Nicolaitan doctrine is what I have outlined here, and the vast majority of Christianity follows this doctrine. An example of Nicolaitan works and someone that does not fear God is someone that is not handing out flyers. This Nicolaitan works is expressed, for example, with someone that has been hypnotized by the political cult of COVID and is wearing masks. And wearing a mask in a place of worship in church is an abomination. This Nicolaitan works is expressed with someone that is not speaking out against the evil that is overtaking the land, which includes, for example, speaking out against people in church wearing masks. Eric Metaxas is currently being blacklisted by the Sovereign Grace Calvinists for drawing the parallel between these faith-alone doctrine Christians and the Christians in Nazi Germany. Metaxas has rightly claimed that the evangelical church is on the hook for and is responsible for the stolen election. Those supposed Christians that are idly standing by and not taking action and speaking out against the evil that is marching over the land are the Nicolaitans. They are the lazy, lukewarm, cowardly Christians, and they have lost their saltiness. They are no longer good for anything except to be trampled under the feet of men, which is why many of them are taking the VACCINE mark of the Antichrist, which is the inverse of the mark that was given in Ezekiel chapter 9 to those that were crying out for justice and righteousness. Contrary to the false doctrine of dispensationalism, which is the package in which free grace comes in, which says that there is supposedly a distinction between supposed church-age saints and tribulation saints, which, by the way, is a main reason why these evangelicals are not able to recognize the mark of the Antichrist, which is this VACCINE. It is judgment on these Christians from God for this free grace dispensationalism, church-age saints versus tribulation saints false doctrine. The truth is, the main purpose of the end times period is to test the faith of saints. And this test comes through the Antichrist and the persecution and the mark of the Antichrist. It is designed to compel these lukewarm Christians to finally stand up for truth and righteousness and demonstrate their faith through risk and sacrifice. And those that will be raptured, those that will be spared the tribulation, those that will be worthy to escape the things that are coming, as Jesus said to always pray for, will be those that have already passed the test of faith. They will be those that have already demonstrated their faith through risk and sacrifice. This is what I believe is the primary distinction between who will be spared the tribulation and who will not, given that the purpose of the tribulation is to test the faith of the saints. It is an act of God's love, because if we had not done so, having then gotten to the kingdom, we will have regretted it, not demonstrating our faith and doing more and taking a risk for Him and sacrificing for Him. And so those that have already been doing that do not need to go through the tribulation. And this, I believe, is what would constitute being worthy of escaping the things that are coming. Obviously, when these predictions come to pass, you will know that you should watch all of the videos on this channel, beginning with the videos that are linked to in the description box below this video. I strongly recommend not going through the videos on this channel in random fashion, selecting titles that may be interesting, but rather I strongly recommend following my recommendations that are listed in the description box below this video. This channel is not a daily or weekly update on the latest news. Rather, this channel is a library that has documented God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Hopefully you at least found this introduction video to be interesting, and if so, please leave a like and upvote the video, and please consider sharing the video. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com, or PredictionsProveIt.com, and also check out the other information that I have linked to on the website. You should also pause this video right now and make a note of my other social media outlets. You never know when you will need them, and you might not be able to find them later. Also, if you want to download these videos as podcasts, I now have a podcast channel at Podbean, which is named Predictions Prove It.